Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. The setting sun painted Manhattan's glass towers in shades of amber and gold, a sight Pinnacle Wolf had witnessed countless times from his penthouse office on the 87th floor. Today, however, the familiar view felt like a cruel reminder of everything slipping through his fingers. At 35, he stood at the apex of New York's financial district, but the empire he'd built was crumbling beneath his feet. His reflection in the floor-to-ceiling window showed a man he barely recognized. The perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit couldn't hide the shadows under his eyes or the tension in his jaw. His dark hair, usually meticulously styled, betrayed signs of running his hands through it countless times today. The platinum wedding band on his left hand felt like it was burning his skin. The message from his lawyer, delivered just hours ago, replayed in his mind with devastating clarity. Pinnacle, Alara's been planning this for years. The offshore accounts, the shell companies, the leaked trade secrets, it was all orchestrated. She's not just filing for divorce, she's orchestrated a hostile takeover through proxy shareholders. I'm sorry, but she's about to own controlling interest in Wolf Enterprises. 8 years of marriage, 8 years of building an empire together, or so he thought. The signs had been there, he realized now. The late-night phone calls she claimed were about charity galas, the mysterious business trips that never quite aligned with her foundation's calendar, the subtle changes in their joint accounts that his trusted wife assured him were routine adjustments. Pinnacle's hand clenched around the crystal tumbler of untouched whiskey. The amber liquid caught the dying sunlight, reminding him of another evening 3 months ago when he'd first sensed something was wrong. He'd come home early, hoping to surprise Alara with dinner plans, only to find her in a hushed video call in his home office. The screen had gone dark too quickly, her explanation too rehearsed. He dismissed his suspicions then, choosing trust over doubt. What a fool he'd been. His phone buzzed with another message from the bank. More assets frozen pending investigation. Alara's claims of financial misconduct had triggered automatic protections, cutting him off from his own wealth. The irony was bitter. Every safeguard he'd put in place to protect their empire was now being used against him. Mr. Wolf, his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom, carrying a note of urgency he never heard before. The board is waiting in the main conference room. They're demanding immediate action. Pinnacle closed his eyes, letting his forehead rest against the cool glass. Below, the city was beginning to light up, millions of tiny lights flickering to life as darkness descended. How many of those lights represented other dreams, other battles, other betrayals? "Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes, Lila," he responded. His voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. Professional to the end, his father would have been proud. His father? The thought brought a fresh wave of pain. Henry Wolf had built the foundation of this company from nothing, teaching Pinnacle the value of integrity in business and loyalty in relationships. What would he say if he could see how his son had let it all slip away? Pinnacle straightened his Hermes tie, a habit from better days that now felt like muscle memory mocking him. The silk, a deep crimson that Alara had chosen power colors for power moves, darling seemed to tighten around his throat like a noose. The wall of awards and achievements that lined his office. Forbes 40. Under 40. Ernst and Young Entrepreneur of the Year. The Financial Times' most innovative CEO Snow, felt like artifacts from another man's life. Each acrylic crystal testament to success would likely be packed up by morning, replaced by whatever puppet CEO Alara and her conspirators had chosen to manage their hostile acquisition. His phone buzzed again, this time a text from Alara herself. "Don't fight this, Pinnacle. You taught me too well. Just sign the papers and walk away with your reputation intact. It's better this way. Better." The word ignited something in him, a spark of the fire that had driven him to build Wolf Enterprises into a billion-dollar technology empire. Better for whom? The woman who'd spent 8 years studying his methods, only to use them against him? The board members who'd smiled to his face while selling their shares to her shell companies? He took one last look at the city spread before him, his city, the concrete and steel jungle where he'd once been king. Within hours, his position as CEO would be ceremonial at best, his voting rights suspended pending the investigation Alara had masterfully orchestrated. Years of building relationships, innovating technologies, and pushing boundaries, all of it balanced on the edge of oblivion. But as he turned toward the conference room, something shifted in Pinnacle Wolf's eyes. The defeated slump of his shoulders transformed into the posture of a man who'd weathered storms before. His father's voice echoed in his memory. "The measure of a man isn't in how he handles success, son. It's in how he rises from failure." He would lose today. Ilara's plan was too perfect, too meticulously executed, to prevent that. She'd studied his methods, learned his strategies, and used them all against him with surgical precision. His soon-to-be ex-wife's machinations had cost him everything he'd built, but Pinnacle Wolf had built his empire once. As he strode toward the conference room, his footsteps echoing through the emptying corridors of power, a new resolve crystallized in his mind. He would rebuild again not for revenge, but to prove that success built on betrayal could never outlast success built on integrity. The boardroom doors loomed before him, voices murmuring behind the frosted glass. Pinnacle squared his shoulders, checked his reflection one last time in the polished surface, and reached for the handle. He might enter this room a king about to be dethroned, but he would leave it a man with nothing left to lose. And sometimes, that was the most dangerous kind of man to be. Taking a deep breath, he pushed open the doors, ready to face whatever came next. The chapter of his life story titled Pinnacle and Ilara was ending, but as the sun finally disappeared behind Manhattan's skyline, he couldn't know that his greatest chapter was about to begin on that would start in the most unexpected place, with the most unexpected person, and change everything he thought he knew about love, trust, and the true meaning of wealth. Chapter 2. A Chance Encounter. 3 months could change everything. Pinnacle Wolf knew this better than most. As he sat in the corner of the Daily Brew, a modest coffee shop in Brooklyn that couldn't have been further from his former life's pristine corporate cafes, but the leather portfolio before him of the few luxuries he'd kept contained spreadsheets of potential investments he might make with his remaining capital, barely 7 figures where there had once been billions. The autumn rain pelted against the cafe's windows, creating a steady rhythm that matched his pensiveness. His Italian wool suit had been replaced by dark jeans and a cashmere sweater, still quality, but understated. He learned quickly that his former wardrobe attracted the wrong kind of attention in his new circumstances. The cafe buzzed with the morning rush. Students hunched over laptops, freelancers claiming tables for the day, and workers grabbing their daily fix before heading to their offices. Pinnacle watched them with a newfound appreciation. These were the kind of people he used to see only through tinted car windows or from his penthouse view. Now, he was one of them. His phone buzzed another email from his lawyers. The investigation into Ilara's dealings was ongoing, but progress was slow. She'd covered her tracks too well, using everything he taught her about business strategy against him. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd married a brilliant woman. He just hadn't expected her brilliance to be weaponized for his destruction. "Sir, would you like a refill?" The voice cut through his brooding, but when he looked up to decline, the words died in his throat. Standing beside his table was a young woman who seemed to embody resilience itself. Her dark skin glowed despite the obvious exhaustion in her eyes, and her curly hair was pulled back in a neat bun that somehow managed to look both professional and slightly rebellious. "Hanamatak read Nora." "Yes," he found himself saying, though his cup was still half full. "Thank you." As she poured the coffee with practiced precision, Pinnacle noticed details his business instincts hadn't quite forgotten how to spot. The slight tremor in her hands suggesting stress, the way her eyes kept darting to the manager's office, the worn but immaculately maintained state of her uniform. This was someone fighting their own battles. The morning rush intensified. Pinnacle watched, as Nora he'd caught her full name from another barista calling out, "Bean, you've got tables 7 through 12 moved through the space with remarkable efficiency." She balanced 3 plates of breakfast items while taking orders, managed the express coffee queue, and somehow maintained a genuine smile that reached her eyes despite the chaos. Then it happened. A patron pushed back their chair without looking, catching Nora mid-stride. The plates went airborne in slow motion, a ballet of impending disaster. The crash that followed silenced the entire cafe. "Bean, my office now." The manager's voice cut through the quiet like a whip. A short man with a permanent scowl emerging from behind the counter. Pinnacle watched as Nora's professional composure cracked just slightly. Mr. Carter, please, I can explain. My father, the payment for the house was due, and I had to. I don't want excuses. That's the third set this month. It's coming out of your paycheck, and one more incident like this, the threat hung in the air, and Pinnacle saw something he recognized all too well, the look of someone watching their world teeter on the edge of collapse. He'd seen it in his own mirror not so long ago. Before he realized what he was doing, Pinnacle was on his feet. Excuse me. His voice carried the authority of his former boardroom days. I believe I'm responsible for the incident. The gentleman's chair caught my briefcase strap, which caused the collision. The lie rolled off his tongue smoothly, years of corporate negotiations making it sound perfectly plausible. Mr. Carter's demeanor shifted instantly at the intervention of a customer. Oh, well, in that case I'd be happy to cover the cost of the damaged items, Pinnacle continued, pulling out his wallet. And I must say, despite the accident, your employee's handling of this morning's rush has been exemplary. I've been here since opening, and her efficiency is remarkable. The manager's scowl wavered, caught between his desire to discipline and the need to appease a customer. Well, yes, of course. Nora, clean this up and get back to work. Work. Sir, there's no need for payment. Accidents happen. As the manager retreated and the cafe's usual buzz resumed, Nora knelt to gather the broken pieces. Pinnacle joined her, ignoring her whispered protests. You didn't have to do that, she said softly, her voice carrying notes of both gratitude and pride. I can handle Mr. Carter. I know you can, Pinnacle replied, carefully gathering shards of ceramic, but sometimes the strongest people are the ones who deserve help the most. Their eyes met over the broken plates, and something shifted in the universe. Pinnacle had sat in this cafe for 3 months, nursing his wounds and plotting his comeback. But in that moment, looking into Nora Bean's determined eyes, he felt something he hadn't expected to feel again so soon. Hope. Thank you, she said finally, standing with the collected debris. But you should know I don't like owing people. A ghost of his old smile touched Pinnacle's lips. How about we call it professional courtesy, one fighter to another? Something in his tone must have resonated because she paused, really looking at him for the first time. You're not just another coffee shop, remote worker, are you? No more than you're just another barista, he countered softly. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken understanding. Then the espresso machine hissed, another order ticket printed, and the real world rushed back in. My break's in an hour, Nora said suddenly, then added with a hint of challenge in her voice. If you're interested in a proper conversation about professional courtesy. Pinnacle glanced at his portfolio of meager investment opportunities, then back at this woman who radiated determination despite her circumstances. I'll be here. As she returned to her duties, moving with renewed purpose, Pinnacle sat back down at his table. The rain had stopped outside, sunlight breaking through the clouds to cast patterns on the cafe floor. 3 months ago, he'd lost everything he thought mattered. But watching Nora navigate the morning rush with unshakable dignity, he wondered if perhaps the universe hadn't just shown him something that mattered more. He pulled out his phone, canceling his afternoon appointments. Sometimes, he remembered his father saying, "Opportunity doesn't knock, it crashes." And as he watched Nora deftly manage the renewed flow of customers, Pinnacle Wolf felt the first stirrings of something he thought Ilara had killed forever. The capacity to trust. Chapter 3. The Proposition. The evening light filtered through the Daily Brew's windows had softened to a gentle amber when Nora finally hung up her apron. Pinnacle watched as she transformed from harried barista to someone entirely different. Shoulders squaring, chin lifting, the weight of customer service sliding away like a shed skin. She changed into a simple black dress that spoke of careful budgeting but excellent taste. "Still here," she observed, sliding into the seat across from him, her voice carrying a hint of surprise, though her eyes sharp and analytical suggested she'd been watching him throughout her shift, trying to piece together his story. Pinnacle pushed a fresh cup of coffee toward her, prepared exactly as he'd observed she liked it during her rare breaks. Her eyebrow arched at this detail, but she accepted the cup. "I'm curious," she said, wrapping her hands around the warm ceramic. "Most men in expensive watches and hand-stitched shoes don't spend entire days in Brooklyn coffee shops. especially not to wait for a conversation with the help. Most baristas don't carry business textbooks in their bags or review stock portfolios during their lunch breaks, he countered, nodding toward her worn backpack, where he'd glimpsed the corner of a finance textbook earlier. A smile tugged at her lips. Touché. She took a sip of coffee, then set the cup down with deliberate precision. So, Pinnacle Wolfiers. I Googled you during my break. Want to tell me why the former CEO of Wolf Enterprises is slumming it in my coffee shop? The directness startled a genuine laugh from him. Former being the operative word, though I'm more interested in hearing about the mortgage payments you mentioned this morning. The shift in her demeanor was subtle but immediate. A tightening around her eyes, fingers tensing around her cup. That's not a standard topic of coffee shop conversation, he finished for her. Neither is corporate takeover by one's wife, but here we are. Silence stretched between them, filled with the ambient sounds of the cafe closing. Chairs being stacked, coffee machines hissing their final cleanings of the day. Finally, Nora spoke, her voice low and controlled. My father wasn't always a gambler. Before Mom died, he was brilliant, ran his own investment firm, taught me everything I know about the market. But grief, she traced the rim of her cup. Grief does things to people. He started small. Sports betting. Poker nights. Then he discovered online gambling. By the time I realized how bad it was, he'd remortgaged our house 3 times. Pinnacle listened, noting the steel in her voiceno self-pity, just facts. It reminded him of himself in boardroom battles. I'm in my final year of business school, she continued, working 2 jobs, maintaining a 4.0 GPA, and trying to keep us from losing everything. The bank gave us one last extension, but we need $250,000 by the end of the month, or we lose the house my grandfather built with his own hands. My father's in rehab now, trying to get clean, but she shrugged, the gesture containing volumes of unspoken worry. And you're too proud to ask for help, Pinnacle observed. Pride has nothing to do with it. I believe in earning what I get. The world doesn't owe me anything. Pinnacle leaned back, studying her. In another life, she would have been exactly the kind of person he'd have fast-tracked for executive leadership. What if I told you I could help you save your house? Her eyes narrowed. Nothing's free in this world, Mr. Wolf. What's the catch? He reached into his portfolio, pulling out a manila envelope he'd had his lawyer prepare after making a few calls during her shift. I need an heir. The words hung in the air between them. Nora's expression didn't change, but he saw her pulse jump at her throat. An heir, she repeated carefully. My wife's takeover was brilliant, but had one flaw. The company's founding documents, written by my father, specify that controlling interest must remain with a wolf by blood. Alara's claiming our prenup is void, but even if she succeeds, she can't hold the company long-term without a wolf heir. She and I never had children, and you want Nora's voice trailed off. Implications dawning. A contract marriage, Pinnacle stated plainly, 1 year, during which we attempt to conceive a child. You'd have full co-parenting rights, of course. In return, I'll pay off your family's mortgage immediately and set up a trust fund for both you and the child. After the year, you can choose to divorce with generous alimony, or he left the alternative unspoken. Nora stood abruptly, pacing the empty cafe. You're proposing a business transaction where I sell my body. No, Pinnacle cut in sharply. I'm proposing a partnership. I've spent the day watching you manage chaos with grace, handle difficult customers with diplomacy, and study advanced finance between orders. You're exactly the kind of person I'd want raising my child, whether we stay married or not. She stopped pacing, turning to face him. Why me? Surely there are plenty of women who'd jump at the chance to marry a former billionaire. Exactly why I'm not asking them, Pinnacle stood, moving to stand before her. I need someone who sees beyond the money, someone who understands both privilege and struggle, someone who will teach my child that wealth is earned, not entitled. The last rays of sunset painted Nora's face in gold as she processed his words. Finally, she reached for the envelope. I want to read the contract first and have my own lawyer review it. I'd be disappointed if you didn't, Pinnacle replied, watching as she pulled out the documents. No intimacy without mutual consent. She read aloud. Full reproductive health coverage. independent financial accounts, co-parenting guarantees. She looked up at him. You've thought this through. I had 8 years to learn from my mistakes with Ilara. I'm not looking for a trophy wife or a victim. I'm looking for a partner. Nora sank back into her chair, documents spread before her. The cafe had gone quiet, their conversation witnessed only by shadows and cooling coffee cups. I need 24 hours, she said finally, to think, to talk to my lawyer. She gestured vaguely. Take 48, Pinnacle replied, pulling out his card, not the old embossed Wolf Enterprises one, but a simple white card with just his name and number. My lawyer's details are in the envelope. Call me when you've decided. He gathered his things, preparing to leave her with the weight of his proposal. At the door, he paused. Nora. She looked up from the contract, her face thoughtful. Whatever you decide, your father's rehab bills are taken care of. Consider it thanks for the excellent coffee service today. Before she could protest, he was gone, stepping into the Brooklyn night. Behind him, through the cafe window, Nora Bean sat, illuminated by a single overhead light, staring at a contract that could change both their lives forever. As Pinnacle walked toward the subway, another adjustment in his new life, he realized his hands were shaking slightly. He'd played high-stakes games before, but never one where the prize was something as precious as hope. Whether Nora said yes or no, he'd just laid his future in the hands of a barista with a warrior's heart and eyes that saw straight through his carefully constructed walls. The stars were barely visible through the city's light pollution, but Pinnacle found himself looking up anyway, remembering something his father used to say: the biggest risks bring the biggest rewards, but only if you're brave enough to trust not just the plan, but the person. For the first time since Ilara's betrayal, Pinnacle Wolf was ready to trust again. Now he just had to wait and see if Nora Bean was willing to take the same leap of faith. Chapter 4. Unexpected Revelations. The law office of Foster and Associates occupied the third floor of a converted brownstone in Manhattan's Lower East Side. Pinnacle sat in the conference room, watching afternoon shadows creep across stacks of contracts and medical disclosure forms. Across the table, Nora's lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Linda Park, scrutinized every clause with the precision of a surgeon. The terms are unusually generous, Park remarked, glancing at Pinnacle over her reading glasses. Full medical coverage, independent accounts, substantial trust fund provisions. Most arrangement marriages I've seen are far more restrictive. Most arrangement marriages aren't with her, Pinnacle replied simply, his eyes drifting to where Nora sat in the waiting room, visible through the glass partition. She was reviewing her own copy of the contracts, a pencil tucked behind her ear, highlighting and making notes with the same focused intensity he'd seen her apply to coffee orders and textbooks. 48 hours had stretched into a week of negotiations, background checks, and medical screening standard procedure, his lawyer assured him. Though Pinnacle had caught the knowing looks exchanged between the legal teams, they'd all seen rushed marriages before, desperate attempts to secure inheritances or prevent hostile takeovers. This felt different. There is one matter we need to discuss privately, Park said, closing the folder before her. The medical results came back this morning. Pinnacle's attention snapped back to the lawyer. Is there a problem? Park's expression remained professionally neutral, but something in her tone shifted. That depends on your perspective, Mr. Wolf. The tests confirm that Miss Bean is, she paused, choosing her words carefully, inexperienced in matters of intimacy. The revelation hit Pinnacle like a physical force. Through the glass, he watched Nora tuck a stray curl behind her ear, unaware of the conversation that was about to change everything. I see, he managed, his mind racing. Does she know you're telling me this? She authorized full disclosure between parties. But Mr. Wolf, Park leaned forward, her professional detachment cracking slightly. Nora is not just my client. She was my teaching assistant at Columbia Business School. She's brilliant, dedicated, and despite her circumstances, she's never taken the easy path. If this arrangement is just about securing an heir— It's not, Pinnacle interrupted, surprising himself with the vehemence in his voice. Not anymore. Rising from his chair, Pinnacle walked to the window, looking out at the city he'd once ruled. The week's interactions with Nora flashed through his mind, Her insistence on paying for her own coffee during their meetings, the way she'd negotiated every clause of the contract with sharp intelligence, how she'd made him laugh for the first time in months with her dry observations about corporate culture. "I need a moment," he said quietly. Park nodded, gathering her papers and slipping out. Pinnacle pulled out his phone, scrolling through the background check results he'd received that morning. Nora Bean, Dean's List every semester despite working full-time, volunteer work at a women's shelter, treasurer of the Business Ethics Club, no dating history, no social media scandals, no hidden vices. Even her father's gambling problems, she'd handled with remarkable discretion, negotiating with creditors while maintaining a perfect GPA. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Nora stood there, highlighted contract in hand, looking professional in a simple navy dress she'd probably bought second-hand. "Your lawyer said you wanted to speak with me." Her voice was steady, but he caught the slight tension in her shoulders. "Come in." Pinnacle gestured to the chairs but remained standing himself. The medical results came back. Ugh. A flush crept up her neck, but she met his gaze directly. "I assume this changes things." "Yes," he said softly, "but not in the way you might think." Moving to sit across from her, Pinnacle chose his next words carefully. "When I proposed this arrangement, I thought I was being pragmatic. An heir for financial security. A fair business transaction. But you're not just a transaction, Nora." She stiffened slightly. "I don't need pity, Pinnacle." "Pity?" He shook his head. "I'm in awe of you. You've maintained your integrity through circumstances that would break most people. You've earned every achievement through pure merit. And now I learned that despite all the pressure and opportunities to take easier paths, you've waited for something real." Nora's fingers twisted the contract in her lap. "I didn't wait out of some noble principle. There just wasn't time between school and work and taking care of Dad. You chose responsibility over instant gratification. You chose long-term goals over short-term pleasure. You chose to build something meaningful instead of settling for temporary solutions." Pinnacle leaned forward, his voice softening. "Do you know how rare that is in my world?" The afternoon light caught the tears threatening to spill from her eyes, but Nora blinked them back. "What are you saying, Pinnacle?" "I'm saying I want to change the terms of our arrangement, not the practical aspects. You'll still have everything we discussed, but I don't want to rush this. No pressure for an heir, no timeline for intimacy. I want to do this right." "Right?" she echoed, confusion evident in her voice. Pinnacle stood, moving to kneel beside her chair. The gesture would have felt melodramatic with anyone else, but with Nora, everything felt natural. "Let me court you properly. Let me earn your trust, not just your signature on a contract. Let me show you that there can be more to this than a business arrangement." Nora's breath caught. "But your company, the takeover, the company will still be there. Alara can't liquidate anything without an heir's approval. That's built into the foundation documents. We have time." He swallowed hard. "And if we take this time and discover we're not compatible, then you'll still have your house, your father will still have his treatment, and you'll have a friend who believes in you, no strings, no pressure, no obligations." The silence that followed was heavy with possibility. Through the window, the city continued its eternal dance of light and shadow, unaware of the pivotal moment unfolding in this small conference room. Finally, Nora spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never been courted before." Pinnacle smiled, reaching up to brush away a tear that had escaped despite her best efforts. "I've never meant it before." She laughed then, a sound of relief and joy and just a touch of hysteria. "This is crazy. A week ago, I was making lattes and trying to figure out how to save my family's house. Now I'm sitting in a lawyer's office with a former billionaire proposing courtship instead of a contract. Life's funny that way," Pinnacle agreed, rising to his feet but keeping hold of her hand. "So, Miss Bean, would you do me the honor of having dinner with me tomorrow night? No contracts, no lawyers, just two people getting to know each other?" Nora looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. Whatever she saw there must have convinced her because she nodded. "Yes, but I'm still keeping my job at the coffee shop. I wouldn't have it any other way." Pinnacle helped her to her feet, "though I might have to stop coming in every day. The other customers are starting to give me strange looks." That's because you've been drinking cold coffee for a week straight just to stay until closing, she teased, some of her natural spark returning. As they walked out of the office together, Pinnacle felt lighter than he had in months. The contract lay forgotten on the conference table, replaced by something far more valuable: hope for a real connection, a chance at genuine love. Park watched them leave, a knowing smile playing on her lips. Sometimes, she mused, the best contracts were the ones that never needed to be signed. And sometimes, the biggest revelations weren't about what was discovered, but about what could be built on that discovery's foundation. Outside, New York's autumn wind caught Nora's hair, releasing the curl from behind her ear. Without thinking, Pinnacle reached out to tuck it back, his fingers lingering for just a moment. The simple intimacy of the gesture spoke volumes about the journey they were about to begin. One step at a time. One touch at a time. One revelation at a time. Chapter 5. Breaking Walls. The late October evening wrapped Manhattan in a golden haze as Pinnacle waited outside Le Bernardin, the Michelin-starred restaurant he'd chosen for their first official dinner. His hand absently touched the inner pocket of his suit jacket, feeling the small velvet box there. Not a ring. Not yet. But a gesture he hoped would show his intentions. 2 weeks had passed since the revelation in the lawyer's office. 2 weeks of carefully orchestrated meetings that walked the line between business and courtship. Pinnacle had rediscovered parts of himself he thought Alara had destroyed forever. The ability to anticipate someone else's joy, the pleasure of planning surprises, the nervous excitement of anticipation. "I told you I could get here on my own," Nora's voice came from behind him, carrying that hint of amused exasperation he'd grown to cherish. She'd refused his offer of a car service, insisting on taking the subway. When Pinnacle turned, his carefully prepared greeting evaporated. Nora stood there in a deep sapphire dress that caught the sunset's light, her hair falling in carefully styled curls around her shoulders. The dress wasn't designer. He'd learned enough about her to know she'd probably found it in a consignment shop, but she wore it with the grace of a queen. "You look," he began, then smiled at her raised eyebrow. "I was going to say beautiful, but that seems inadequate." "Smooth talker," she teased, but the flush on her cheeks betrayed her pleasure. "The dress was my mom's. I found it in the attic while clearing out some of Dad's gambling debts." Her voice caught slightly on the last words. Pinnacle's hand moved automatically to her elbow, a gesture of support that had become natural over the past weeks. "How is he doing?" "Better. The rehab program you recommended, it's making a difference. He's actually talking about his grief over Mom now, not just trying to numb it." She looked up at him, eyes bright with unshed tears. "Thank you for that, for helping without making it feel like charity." "You're welcome," he said simply, leading her into the restaurant. The maitre d' recognized him instantly. Some habits of wealth transcended temporary setbacks and led them to a private corner table overlooking the city. "Pinnacle," Nora breathed, taking in the crystal chandeliers and elegant decor. "This is too much." "Actually," he pulled out her chair, "this is exactly enough. Besides, we're celebrating." Her eyebrows drew together as she sat. "Celebrating what?" Pinnacle took his own seat, savoring the moment. "Your midterm results came in, top of your class in advanced financial strategy." "How did you?" She stopped, shaking her head with a laugh. "Let me guess. You still have friends at Columbia." A business school professor. Park might have mentioned it when she called to check on our arrangement. He picked up the wine list, then set it down again, meeting her eyes. "She's quite protective of you, you know. Linda's been more than just a professor. After Mom died, when Dad started spiraling, she helped me figure out how to keep my scholarship while working full-time." Nora smoothed her napkin, a nervous gesture he'd noticed she made when talking about difficult times. "She's the one who convinced me to hear you out about the contract. Actually, said you weren't like most corporate wolves, pun intended." Pinnacle's laugh drew curious glances from nearby tables. "I'm glad she did, though I have to admit, this isn't quite how I imagined things would progress when I first walked into your coffee shop." "You mean you didn't plan to fall for your contractual bride-to-be?" The words slipped out before Nora could catch them, and her eyes widened in momentary panic. Instead of deflecting with humor, Pinnacle reached across the table, taking her hand. "No, I didn't plan it. Just like I didn't plan for Alara's betrayal, or losing my company, or finding myself sitting in a Brooklyn coffee shop, watching the strongest person I've ever met balance 3 jobs and a 4.0 GPA, without losing her compassion. The waiter approached, but Pinnacle held up his free hand, asking for a moment. From his jacket, he withdrew the velvet box. "Pinnacle," Nora started, alarm crossing her features. "It's not a ring," he assured her quickly, sliding the box across the table. "Open it." With trembling fingers, Nora lifted the lid. Inside lay a delicate gold key on a chain. Her confusion was evident. "It's the key to my father's first office," Pinnacle explained softly, "the space where Wolf Enterprises began. It's still there, gathering dust in a small building in Queens. I've kept it all these years as a reminder of where I came from, that success isn't about the height of the tower you build, but the strength of its foundation." He stood, moving to her side of the table to fasten the necklace around her throat. The key settled just below her collarbone, catching the light like a promise. "I want you to have it," he continued, his fingers lingering on the chain, "because you remind me of everything I used to believe in before I let success corrupt those beliefs. You've shown me that true strength isn't in what you can take, but in what you can build while keeping your integrity intact." Nora's hand came up to touch the key, her eyes meeting his. "I don't know what to say. Say you'll help me rebuild not just the company, but everything. Say you'll let me prove that what started as a contract can become something real. Say you'll trust me to be worthy of your first love story." The restaurant had gone quietly respectful around them, other diners sensing the weight of the moment. Through the windows, New York's lights were coming alive, a constellation of earthbound stars. "I'm scared," Nora admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "Not of you, but of how much I want to say yes. I've spent so long being practical, being responsible. Being strong doesn't mean you can't be vulnerable," Pinnacle said gently. "Trust me. I'm learning that lesson right alongside you." She looked at him then, really looked at him, seeing past the former CEO, past the wealthy businessman, to the man who'd sat in her coffee shop day after day, watching her work with quiet admiration, the man who'd helped her father without fanfare, who'd changed the terms of their arrangement the moment he realized she deserved more than a business transaction. "Yes," she said finally, her smile breaking through like sunrise. "Yes, to rebuilding. Yes, to making this real. Yes," to she gestured between them. "Whatever this is becoming." Pinnacle felt something in his chest expand, a warmth he'd thought forever frozen by Alara's betrayal. He leaned down, his intention clear, but hesitated a breath away from Nora's lips. "May I?" he whispered, giving her the choice. Her answer was to close the distance herself, the kiss soft and sweet and full of promise. It wasn't the passionate embrace of romance novels, but something better, a first step, a wall breaking, a bridge beginning to form between two hearts that had forgotten how to trust. When they finally parted, the waiter had discreetly reappeared with champagne. Pinnacle returned to his seat, but their hands found each other across the table again, naturally, like they'd always meant to be connected. "So," Nora said, her eyes dancing with both joy and mischief, "does this mean you'll stop ordering cold coffee just to stay until closing time?" "Never," Pinnacle declared, raising his champagne glass. "Some traditions are sacred." As they toasted their new beginning, the key around Nora's neck caught the light again. It was more than just a piece of Wolf Enterprises history now. It was a symbol of walls breaking down, of trust being rebuilt, of two people discovering that sometimes the best business decisions have nothing to do with business at all. And as they spent the evening sharing stories, dreams, and hopes, the contract that had brought them together lay forgotten in a lawyer's office, replaced by something far more binding. The growing certainty that what had started as an arrangement was blooming into love. Chapter 6. The Heart's Truth. Central Park in November painted a canvas of amber and gold, leaves dancing on crisp breezes as Pinnacle and Nora walked along the winding paths. A month had passed since the dinner at Le Bernardin, a month of carefully balanced moments between their professional arrangements and growing personal connection. Pinnacle watched Nora as she paused to take a photo of the sunset reflecting off the lake. She still insisted on working her shifts at the Daily Brew, though she'd finally accepted his help with her tuition. The key he'd given her glinted at her throat, now a permanent fixture that she touched unconsciously when deep in thought. "You're staring again," she said without looking away from her phone screen, the teasing note in her voice carrying none of the weariness it had held in their earlier days. "Can you blame me?" He moved closer, his shoulder brushing hers as he looked at the photo she'd captured. "You make everything look more beautiful just by being near it." She rolled her eyes, but her smile betrayed her pleasure. "Still practicing those smooth lines. I see. Only stating facts." He took her hand, an action that had become natural over the past weeks. "Though I have to admit, I never expected to become a social media sensation." Nora laughed, tucking her phone away. The photo would likely end up on her modest but growing Instagram account, where their outings had attracted attention from both business media and romance enthusiasts. From contract to love, one headline had speculated recently. "At least they're not calling me a gold digger anymore," she mused, letting him guide her toward their favorite bench overlooking the lake. "Linda says the press is actually helping my job prospects." Apparently, being the woman who tamed Pinnacle Wolf makes for an interesting resume addition. "Tamed?" Pinnacle arched an eyebrow, drawing her closer as they sat. "Is that what you've done?" "Well, you haven't hostile takeovered anyone in weeks," she teased, then sobered slightly. "Though I did see Alara's latest interview." Pinnacle's hand tightened briefly around hers. His ex-wife had gone on a popular business show, painting herself as the wronged party, claiming their marriage had been loveless, and his current relationship with Nora was just another corporate manipulation. "Does it bother you?" he asked quietly. "The speculation, the comparisons." Nora turned to face him fully, her free hand coming up to touch the key at her throat. "At first, it did. I kept waiting for someone to expose our arrangement, to prove I was just another of Pinnacle Wolf's strategic moves. But then I realized something." "What's that?" "The arrangement stopped being just business the moment you changed the contract, maybe even before that." She smiled softly. "The Pinnacle Wolf, who only cared about securing an heir, wouldn't have sat through 14-hour shifts just to walk me home. He wouldn't have remembered how I take my coffee or helped my father find the right therapist. He wouldn't have given me his father's key and trusted me with its history." The setting sun painted her skin in warm gold, making her eyes sparkle as she continued. "You've never treated me like a transaction, Pinnacle, even when that's all it was supposed to be." Pinnacle reached up, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. "You were never just a transaction, Nora. You were a revelation." She leaned into his touch, and he marveled at how far they'd come from their first cautious meetings. The business prodigy who'd lost everything had found something far more valuable than corporate control. He'd found someone who saw past the wealth and power to the man beneath. "This isn't just business anymore, is it?" Nora whispered, echoing his own thoughts. Pinnacle took a deep breath, knowing this moment would change everything. "No, it's not. It hasn't been for a while now." A group of tourists passed nearby, their cameras clicking as they captured the autumn scenery. Neither Pinnacle nor Nora noticed, too caught up in the weight of the moment. I think Nora hesitated, then squared her shoulders with that quiet determination he'd first noticed in the coffee shop. "I think I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, more binding than any contract they'd drafted. Pinnacle felt his heart race, emotions he'd thought long buried, rushing to the surface. "Think," he asked softly, his thumb brushing her cheek. "Because I know I'm falling in love with you, Nora Bean. I think I started the moment you stood up to your manager, dignity intact, even with broken plates at your feet." Tears sparkled in her eyes, but her smile was radiant. "That's not very businesslike, Mr. Wolf." "Good." He leaned forward, resting his forehead against hers. "I'm tired of business. I want real. I want messy and complicated and beautiful. I want mornings watching you study and evenings hearing about your day. I want to build something that has nothing to do with stock prices or corporate takeovers. Pinnacle." She breathed his name like a prayer. "I want you," he continued, pulling back just enough to meet her eyes, not as an arrangement or a contract or a strategic move, just you, exactly as you are, with your double shifts and textbooks and incredible heart that somehow hasn't been hardened by all life's thrown at you. A tear escaped, trailing down her cheek. Pinnacle caught it with his thumb, the gesture tender and protective. "The contract is void," he said firmly. "Has been since that day in the lawyer's office. Whatever happens next, it's because we choose it, not because we signed it." Nora's hands came up to frame his face. Her touch, feather light. "And what if I choose you not, Pinnacle Wolf, the CEO, not the business arrangement, just you? Then you'll make me the happiest man in New York." He smiled. "Though I warn you, I still plan to drink cold coffee at your shop just to see you roll your eyes at me." She laughed, the sound pure joy. "I might have to cut you off for your own good." "A business decision?" "No," she whispered, closing the distance between them. "Purely personal." Their kiss was different from the gentle one they'd shared at Le Bernardin. This was deeper, richer, filled with the certainty of feelings too strong to be contained by legal documents or corporate strategies. When they finally parted, the sun had set completely, painting the sky in shades of purple and deep blue. The first stars were appearing, twinkling like possibilities. "So," Pinnacle said, keeping her close, "what happens now?" Nora smiled. That mix of strength and sweetness that had first caught his attention now directed fully at him. "Now we write our own contract. No lawyers, no clauses. Just promises we choose to keep." "Like what?" "Like promising to always tell each other the truth, even when it's hard." She touched the key at her throat. "Like promising to remember where we started, but not let it define where we're going." Pinnacle caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Like promising to love you more each day, not because a document requires it, but because my heart demands it." Around them, Central Park continued its eternal dance of seasons, leaves falling like nature's confetti around two people who had found each other in the most unexpected way. Their story, which had begun as a business arrangement, had transformed into something far more valuable. A love built on trust, standing, and the courage to break down walls. As they sat together, planning their future with the same care they'd once used to plan their contract, both Pinnacle and Nora knew that some arrangements couldn't be contained in legal documents or corporate strategies. Some arrangements were written in the heart, where the only binding clause was love. Chapter C: Past Shadows. The headlines exploded across every major business publication on a cold December morning. Wolf Enterprises heir apparent. Former CEO's new love interest has hidden past. Nora saw them first, her phone buzzing with notifications as she opened the Daily Brew for her morning shift. Her hands trembled slightly as she read the article, but her voice remained steady as she called Pinnacle. "We have a problem." Within 20 minutes, Pinnacle's car pulled up outside the coffee shop. He hadn't bothered with a tie, his usually immaculate appearance showing signs of haste. The concern in his eyes deepened when he saw Nora's face. "I saw the headlines," he said, reaching for her hand. "We can handle this." "Can we?" Nora led him to a quiet corner of the shop, away from curious eyes. She pulled up the full article on her tablet, where Alara's calculated attack lay in pristine digital clarity. The piece was masterfully crafted, painting a picture of a desperate family drowning in gambling debts, suggesting that Nora had orchestrated their entire relationship to save her family's fortune. Ilara had somehow obtained photos of Nora's father outside various casinos, medical records from his rehab stays, even bank statements showing the mortgage payments. "She's been watching us," Pinnacle realized, his jaw tightening. "All this time, she's been gathering ammunition." "It gets worse." Nora scrolled down, revealing quotes from supposed former classmates claiming she'd always been calculating, using her looks and intelligence to manipulate situations. "They're trying to make me look like me," a cool voice interrupted. Both Pinnacle and Nora looked up to find Alara Wolf standing before them, impeccable in a Chanel suit that probably cost more than Nora's yearly tuition. "You have no right to be here." Pinnacle started to rise, but Nora's hand on his arm stopped him. "No," Nora said quietly. "Let her speak. I want to hear what she has to say." Ilara's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched as she studied Nora. Well, perhaps you're not as naive as you appear." She settled uninvited into the chair across from them, her presence drawing attention from other customers. "I must admit, you played this better than I expected. The innocent barista act, the hard-working student routine every convincing." "It's not an act," Nora replied, her voice level. "But then, you wouldn't understand that, would you?" The concept of actually working for what you want. A flash of anger crossed Ilara's face before her mask of sophisticated amusement returned. Says the girl who signed a contract to marry a wealthy man. Please, spare me the moral high ground. The contract was my idea, Pinnacle interjected, but Ilara waved him off. Of course it was, darling, just like our marriage was your idea. You do so love to think you're in control. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a silky whisper. Tell me, Nora, has he told you about the other contracts, the ones before me? Pinnacle has such a habit of trying to buy love. Nora felt Pinnacle tense beside her, but her grip on his arm remained steady. Whatever happened before doesn't matter, she said firmly. The past is the past. Oh, but it does matter. Ilara's smile turned predatory, because history has such a delicious way of repeating itself. You see, I've made certain arrangements with some media outlets. By this afternoon, every major network will be running stories about your father's gambling addiction, your desperate financial situation, and how you seduced Pinnacle Wolf in a calculated plan to save your family's fortune. You're forgetting something, Nora replied, her voice gaining strength. Those stories? They're true. My father is a gambling addict. We were in financial trouble. And yes, Pinnacle and I did initially discuss a contract marriage. She stood slowly, drawing herself to her full height. The difference is, I've never hidden from my truth. Pinnacle watched in amazement as Nora faced down his ex-wife, her courage radiating like a physical force. Go ahead, Nora continued. Release your stories. Show the world my father's struggles. Expose our financial problems. But while you're at it, make sure to include how he's been clean for 3 months now, attending daily meetings and counseling other addicts. Make sure to mention that I worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat while maintaining a 4.0 GPA, and definitely include that when Pinnacle offered to help, the first thing I did was insist on a legal review of every document. Ilara's composure slipped slightly. You're making a mistake defending him. I can destroy you both. No, Pinnacle said quietly, standing to join Nora. You already tried to destroy me once, Ilara. All you succeeded in doing was showing me what real strength looks like. He took Nora's hand. It looks like this. Like someone who faces their struggles head on, instead of manipulating others to fight their battles. The coffee shop had gone silent, customers pretending not to watch the drama unfolding before them. Ilara glanced around, suddenly aware of her audience. You're both fools, she hissed, gathering her designer bag. This isn't over. Actually, it is. Nora's voice carried across the quiet space. Because unlike you, I don't need to destroy others to feel secure in myself. I've already won, Ilara, not because I took something from you, but because I found something real with Pinnacle, something you never had the courage to even try for. Ilara's heel caught on the floor as she stepped back, the small stumble cracking her perfect facade for just a moment. Uncertainty flashed across her face. Release your stories, Nora continued. Gentler now. Show the world who we really are. Because the truth is that Pinnacle and I found each other when we were both at our lowest points. We saw each other's struggles and chose to face them together. That's not a scandal, Ilara. That's a love story. The bell above the door chimed as Ilara fled, leaving behind only the lingering scent of expensive perfume and defeated manipulation. Pinnacle pulled Nora close, pressing a kiss to her temple. That was incredible. You were incredible. She melted into his embrace, finally allowing herself to tremble. I was terrified. But you stood your ground anyway. He turned her to face him. Do you know what I was thinking, watching you stand up to her? That I might have just made things worse? That I fall more in love with you every day? He brushed a tear from her cheek. That you're stronger than anyone I've ever known, not because you never feel fear, but because you face it with such grace. The coffee shop erupted in applause, customers who had witnessed the entire scene showing their support. Nora blushed, burying her face in Pinnacle's chest. A woman approached them, holding out a business card. I'm Elena Martinez from the Wall Street Journal. If you're willing, I'd love to tell your real story, the whole truth, not just the sensational headlines. Pinnacle felt Nora straighten in his arms, gathering her courage once more. Actually, she said, I think it's time the world heard the truth about love that grows from honesty, not manipulation. About second chances and real strength. As they sat down with the reporter, Pinnacle watched Nora begin to tell their story, not the sanitized version Ilara had tried to twist, but the real one, with all its complications and beauty. He touched the key hanging at her throat, remembering his father's words about foundations and trust. Outside, snow began to fall, covering Manhattan in a clean, white blanket. Like their love story, it was covering the past but not erasing it, creating something new and beautiful from what had come before. The shadows of the past might still linger, but in facing them together, Pinnacle and Nora had proven that true love isn't about perfect beginnings. It's about choosing each other, flaws and all, and building something stronger than any force trying to tear it down. Chapter 8. The Proposal. The rebuilt Wolf Enterprises headquarters gleamed against the February sky, its glass and steel facade reflecting the winter sunset like flames. Inside, the grand ballroom on the top floor, New York's elite gathered for the company's official relaunch gala, curious to witness Pinnacle Wolf's phoenix-like rise from the ashes of betrayal. Nora stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows in a sapphire silk gown. Pinnacle had insisted on having custom-made for her. The Wall Street Journal article had changed everything, transforming their story from potential scandal into a modern fairy tale of redemption and real love. The public had fallen in love with the barista who'd stood up to corporate manipulation with grace and authenticity. "You're fidgeting again," Linda Park observed, appearing at her side with 2 champagne flutes. "Relax. You've earned your place here." "Have I?" Nora accepted the champagne, her other hand unconsciously reaching for the key that still hung at her throat. "Sometimes, it feels like I'm living someone else's life." "Really?" Linda's eyebrow arched. "The Nora Bean I know earned her MBA while working full-time, helped rehabilitate her father, and stood up to one of the most powerful women in New York business. That sounds very much like your life." Nora smiled, remembering how far they'd come since those early days in the lawyer's office. Her father was now 6 months sober, counseling other addicts and slowly rebuilding his own consulting practice. The family home was secure, and her final semester at Columbia was drawing to a close with job offers already rolling in. Speaking of powerful women, Linda nodded toward the entrance. "Your boyfriend's about to make quite a statement." Pinnacle appeared in the doorway, commanding attention without effort, in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. But it wasn't his appearance that drew gasps from the assembled guests. It was what he carried in his hands, a familiar stack of papers, the original contract that had brought them together. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and Nora felt her heart skip. There was something in his expression, a mixture of nervousness and determination she'd never seen before. "Ladies and gentlemen," Pinnacle's voice carried across the suddenly hushed room, "thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate Wolf Enterprises' new beginning. But before we discuss business, I have something more important to address." He began walking toward Nora, the contract held before him like an offering. 8 months ago, I sat in a coffee shop, watching the strongest, most remarkable woman I'd ever met balance 3 jobs while pursuing her dreams. I thought I was being clever, offering her a business arrangement that would solve both our problems. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Pinnacle stopped before Nora. I had it all planned out. A contract marriage, an heir to secure the company's future, a neat solution to restore what I'd lost. But something happened that no contract could have anticipated. With deliberate ceremony, Pinnacle held up the papers. "This document represents everything I used to believe about love and partnership. That they could be negotiated, controlled, secured with signatures and legal clauses." He paused, his eyes never leaving Nora. "I was wrong." In one smooth motion, he tore the contract in half, then quarters, letting the pieces fall like confetti around them. The assembled crowd gasped, then fell absolutely silent. Nora Bean, Pinnacle's voice softened, meant now only for her, though the room's perfect acoustics carried every word. "You've taught me that real love can't be contracted or controlled. It grows in the spaces between coffee shop conversations and late-night study sessions. It builds itself in moments of strength and vulnerability, in standing together against storms, in choosing each other every day, not because of signatures on paper, but because of signatures on our hearts." Nora felt tears threatening as Pinnacle lowered himself to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. The ring inside wasn't the massive diamond one might expect from a billionaire businessman. Instead, it was an elegant vintage piece that she recognized from old photos of his mother. "This ring belonged to my mother," Pinnacle explained, his own voice thick with emotion, "and before that, to my grandmother's strong women who built their own legacies alongside the men they loved. When I lost my way, forgot the values they tried to teach me about real partnership, you reminded me, you showed me that true wealth isn't in what we own, but in who we choose to share our journey with." He took her hand, and Nora was dimly aware of cameras flashing, of Linda's supportive presence beside her, of the entire New York business elite, holding their breath. "I'm not offering a contract this time," Pinnacle continued. "I'm offering my heart, my trust, my future, everything I am, and everything I hope to become. I'm offering a partnership built not on paper, but on love, respect, and the kind of strength that comes from facing life's challenges together." Nora's free hand touched the key at her throat, remembering the night he'd given it to her, how far they'd come since then. Nora Bean, woman of extraordinary strength and incomparable heart. "Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife, not because of any business arrangement or social advantage, but simply because I love you more than I ever thought possible?" The silence in the room was absolute. Hundreds of New York's most powerful people, collectively holding their breath. But Nora barely noticed them. All she could see was the man who'd walked into her coffee shop with a business proposal and ended up stealing her heart. "You know," she said, her voice carrying clearly despite its softness, "for a brilliant businessman, you can be remarkably slow sometimes." Pinnacle's eyebrows drew together in confusion, and she laughed, the sound pure joy. "I've been yours since you sat drinking cold coffee for 14 hours just to walk me home. I've been yours since you helped my father without asking anything in return. I've been yours since you tore up the first contract and asked to court me properly." She pulled him to his feet, taking his face between her hands. "Yes, Pinnacle Wolf. Yes, to being your wife, your partner, your everything. Yes, to building a future that has nothing to do with contracts and everything to do with love." The ring slid perfectly onto her finger as their lips met, the assembled crowd erupting in applause and cheers. Someone, probably Linda, was dabbing at tears, and somewhere in the back, a champagne cork popped festively. When they finally parted, Pinnacle pressed his forehead to hers. "I love you," he whispered. "Just for her. No clauses, no conditions, no end date." "I love you too," she replied, her smile radiant. "Though I hope you know I'm still keeping my job at the coffee shop until graduation." Pinnacle laughed, pulling her close. "I wouldn't have it any other way. Though I should warn you, I plan to drink even more cold coffee now that you're officially agreeing to spend your life with me." Around them, the gala transformed into an impromptu engagement celebration. But Pinnacle and Nora remained in their own world for a moment longer, standing amid the torn pieces of their original contract, proof that sometimes the best agreements are the ones written not on paper, but on two hearts that choose each other freely, completely, and without reservation. The setting sun painted the city in shades of promise. And as Pinnacle and Nora turned to face their guests and their future together, both knew that this was better than any contract could have ever been. This was real. This was forever. This was love in its purest, most uncontracted form. Chapter 9. Building Trust. Spring bloomed across Manhattan, cherry blossoms dusting Central Park in pale pink, as Pinnacle and Nora navigated the delicate dance of merging their lives. The media speculation about their engagement had finally begun to fade, replaced by genuine interest in their unique love story. One sunny Sunday morning, Pinnacle stood in the doorway of their new brownstone study, watching Nora prepare for her final MBA presentation. She'd insisted on keeping her small apartment until graduation, but gradually, her books and papers had migrated to this space he'd created specifically for her. "You're hovering," she said without looking up from her laptop, a smile playing at her lips. "I thought you had a board meeting to prepare for." "I do." He moved behind her chair, dropping a kiss on top of her head. "But watching my brilliant fiancé revolutionize modern business theory is far more interesting." Nora leaned back into his touch, the engagement ring catching morning light. "Flattery will get you everywhere, Mr. Wolf. But I still need to finish this presentation." Their comfortable moment was interrupted by the doorbell. Pinnacle felt Nora tense slightly. They weren't expecting visitors, and unexpected arrivals had meant trouble in the past months. "I'll get it." He squeezed her shoulders reassuringly, but Nora was already rising. Her warrior spirit that he'd first fallen in love with shining through. "We'll get it together," she said firmly. "No more facing things alone, remember?" They found Nora's father, Thomas Bean, on their doorstep. 6 months sober had transformed him. His eyes were clear, his stance steady, though anxiety lined his face. "Dad," Nora's voice carried surprise but not fear. "Is everything okay?" "Better than okay, sweetheart." Thomas pulled an envelope from his jacket. "I've been working with my sponsor, making amends. This," he held out the envelope with slightly trembling hands, "is the first installment of paying back what I owe you both." Pinnacle started to protest, but Nora's hand on his arm stopped him. She understood this wasn't about money. It was about her father's recovery, about rebuilding trust one step at a time. "Come in," she said softly, leading them to the sunny kitchen where coffee was already brewing, old habits from her barista days dying hard. As they settled around the kitchen island, Thomas placed the envelope between them. "I've started consulting again," he explained. "Small projects at first, but it's growing. This is 10% of my first quarter's earnings." "Dad, you don't have to," Nora began, but Thomas shook his head. "Yes, I do." His voice was firm, not because of the money. Pinnacle's generosity already secured the house, but because you deserve to see that your father can be responsible again, that I can be someone you're proud of. Tears sparkled in Nora's eyes as she reached across the counter to take her father's hand. "I've always been proud of you, Dad. Even at your lowest, I knew the real you was still in there somewhere." Pinnacle watched the exchange, remembering his own father's lessons about trust and legacy. "Mr. Bean," he said carefully, "what if we use that money to start a foundation, something to help other families affected by gambling addiction?" Both Beans turned to look at him, and he continued, warming to the idea. "We could combine it with some of Wolf Enterprises' charitable funds, create something meaningful, maybe even partner with treatment centers like the one that helped you." Thomas's eyes lit up with the same spark of business intelligence that Nora often displayed. "A foundation focused on both treatment and financial recovery. There's nothing quite like that out there right now." "And who better to run it," Nora added, catching Pinnacle's vision, "than someone who's lived both sides of the story, someone who can speak to both the struggle and the recovery." The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows as father and daughter began brainstorming ideas, their shared passion for helping others, bridging the gaps that addiction had created. Pinnacle made coffee, serving it in the mismatched mugs Nora had insisted on keeping from her apartment, small reminders of where their story began. Later that afternoon, after Thomas had left with renewed purpose and preliminary foundation plans, Pinnacle found Nora in their bedroom, sitting on the window seat that overlooked their small garden. "Thank you," she said as he joined her, "for understanding about the money, about Dad needing to make amends his own way." "Hey," he tucked her against his side, "your strength in handling your father's addiction was one of the first things that made me fall in love with you. Supporting his recovery is just part of loving you." She turned to face him, her expression serious. "Do you ever worry about inheriting addiction tendencies? I mean, for our future children?" The question hit him with its vulnerability, its trust in sharing such deep fears. "I think," he said carefully, "that any children we have will be blessed with their mother's strength and resilience, and if they ever face such challenges, they'll have parents who understand both struggle and recovery." Nora's hand drifted to her stomach, a gesture of future possibility. "I've been thinking about children more lately, about what kind of parents we'd be." "Honest ones," Pinnacle said firmly. "We tell them about their grandfather's recovery, about how their parents met over cold coffee and broken plates, about how love isn't about perfect beginnings, but about choosing each other every day, even the hard days, especially the hard days." He kissed her temple. "That's what makes it real." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the garden's first spring flowers reach toward the sun. The foundation plans lay on the desk nearby. Next to Nora's MBA presentation and Pinnacle's board meeting notes, their professional and personal lives intertwining naturally. "We should get married in the garden," Nora said suddenly. "Not some grand hotel ballroom or fancy venue right here, where we're building our life together. Pinnacle smiled, remembering the contract that had once seemed so important. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. She turned in his arms. Linda can officiatish, got certified just for us. Dad can walk me down the aisle when he gets his 9-month sobriety chip. And maybe, she bit her lip, suddenly shy, maybe we could serve coffee from the Daily Brew, for old time's sake. Only if you promise not to make me drink it cold, he teased, then grew serious. It's perfect, Nora, just like you. Not perfect, she corrected, touching the key that still hung at her throat. Real. That's better than perfect anyway. As the afternoon light painted their room in shades of gold, Pinnacle held his fiancée close, marveling at how far they'd come from that first business proposal. They'd faced media scrutiny, family struggles, and the ghosts of past betrayals, emerging stronger with each challenge. Trust, they'd learned, wasn't built in grand gestures or legal documents. It was built in small moments, in keeping promises, in facing fears together, in choosing love over pride again and again. Their foundation was stronger than any contract could have created, because it was built on something far more powerful than business arrangements or social advantages. It was built on love, freely given and freely returned, growing stronger with each passing day. Chapter 10. A New Beginning. The May morning dawned perfect and clear. Sunlight streaming through the brownstone windows as final wedding preparations transformed their garden into an intimate paradise. White roses and cherry blossoms created natural arches, their fragrance mixing with the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee from the Daily Brew's mobile cart. Nora stood in the master bedroom, watching the early morning bustle below. Her wedding dress hung nearby, a vintage-inspired creation that perfectly balanced elegance with simplicity. Like everything about their ceremony, it represented who they truly were, not what society expected them to be. "Stop peeking at the garden," Linda Park chided gently, entering with a garment bag draped over her arm. "Pinnacle's down there directing the setup, and you know it's bad luck to see the groom before the ceremony. Since when do you believe in luck?" Nora smiled, but stepped away from the window. "I thought you were all about making your own destiny. Today, I believe in everything." Linda laid the garment bag across the bed, including the power of a father's redemption. As if on cue, a knock sounded at the door. Thomas Bean entered, looking distinguished in his new suit, the 9-month sobriety chip gleaming proudly on his lapel like a medal of honor. "Ready to help your old man practice walking straight?" he asked, his attempt at humor barely masking his emotion. Nora crossed the room to straighten his tie, a gesture that spoke volumes about their healed relationship. "You haven't walked anything but straight for 9 months, Dad. Today is just about showing everyone else what I already know. You're back." The moment was interrupted by excited voices from the garden. Pinnacle's nieces had arrived, their flower girl dresses creating swirls of pastel colors as they explored the decorated space. "I should get started on your hair," Linda said. But Thomas held up a hand. "Give us a minute," he asked softly. Once Linda had left, he turned to his daughter. "I have something for you. Your mother, she wanted you to have this on your wedding day." From his pocket, he withdrew a small blue velvet box. Inside nestled a delicate pearl bracelet that Nora remembered from childhood, watching it sparkle on her mother's wrist during special occasions. "Dad," her voice caught as he fastened it around her wrist. "She'd be so proud of you, sweetheart," he said. "Not just for graduating top of your class or for helping save Wolf Enterprises, but for your heart, for believing in second chances, in redemption." He touched the sobriety chip on his lapel. "For showing me the way back to myself." Tears threatened to spill. But Linda's return with the hair and makeup team created a welcome diversion. The next hours passed in a blur of preparation, laughter, and precious moments captured by their intimate photography team. Finally, Nora stood before the full-length mirror, transformed yet completely herself. The vintage-style dress hugged her curves before flowing into a modest train, its simplicity enhanced by her mother's pearls at her wrist and Pinnacle's key still hanging at her throat. Her dark skin glowed with happiness, and her eyes sparkled with joyful anticipation. "Pinnacle's going to stop breathing when he sees you," Linda declared, adjusting the simple veil one last time, now dressed in her officiant's robe, looking both professional and emotional. Are you ready? Nora took a deep breath, catching her father's proud reflection behind her. I've been ready since cold coffee and broken plates. The garden had been transformed into an enchanted space, with only 50 carefully chosen guests seated beneath flowering arbors. The Daily Brew staff, dressed in formal versions of their work attire, served specialty coffee drinks named after milestone moments in Pinnacle and Nora's relationship. As the string quartet began playing, Pinnacle took his place beneath an arch of white roses. He'd chosen a classic black tuxedo but wore no tie, a nod to their coffee shop beginnings. His eyes fixed on the French doors leading from the house to the garden, his heart racing with anticipation. The music shifted, and the doors opened. Thomas appeared with Nora on his arm, and Pinnacle forgot how to breathe. She was radiant, beautiful in a way that transcended physical appearance. She glowed with love, strength, and the kind of joy that comes from knowing exactly where you belong. Their eyes met across the garden, and everything else faded away. The carefully planned ceremony, the gathered guests, even Linda's eloquent words about love and trust became background to the electric connection between them. When it came time for their vows, Pinnacle spoke first, his voice carrying clearly across the hushed garden. Nora Bean, I stand here today not as a CEO, not as a businessman, but as a man who found his heart again in a Brooklyn coffee shop. You came into my life when I'd lost faith in love, in trust, in the possibility of real partnership. You showed me that true strength isn't in controlling everything, but in being vulnerable enough to let someone else in. He took her hands in his, thumbs brushing over her knuckles. I vow to love you through cold coffee and broken plates, through board meetings and midnight study sessions. I vow to be your partner in all things, to support your dreams as fiercely as you've supported mine. I vow to remember every day that real love isn't about contracts or conditions. It's about choosing each other again and again, through whatever life brings. Nora's voice trembled slightly as she began her own vows. Pinnacle Wolf, you walked into my coffee shop with a business proposal and walked out with my heart. You saw Minot just the struggling barista or the ambitious student. But all of me, you helped me save my family without making it feel like charity. Helped me achieve my dreams without trying to control them. She squeezed his hands. I vow to be your partner in all things, to face whatever challenges come our way together. I vow to keep believing in second chances, in the power of redemption, in the kind of love that builds rather than breaks. I vow to choose you every day, not because of any contract, but because my heart recognized its home in yours. Linda's voice was thick with emotion as she led them through their ring exchange. The bands were simple platinum, inscribed with a coffee cup on the inside their private joke, their origin story, their reminder of how love can bloom in the most unexpected places. By the power vested in me, Linda declared, and with more joy than I can express, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Pinnacle, you may kiss your bride. Their first kiss as a married couple was sweet and profound, carrying the weight of their journey and the promise of their future. The garden erupted in applause and cheers, coffee cups raised in celebration as they turned to face their guests, now officially Mr. and Mrs. Wolf. The setting sun painted the garden in shades of gold and rose. The Daily Brew staff began serving their signature drink for the toast, a special blend they'd named Second Chances. Pinnacle pulled Nora close, whispering in her ear, "Happy?" She touched the key at her throat, then the pearl bracelet at her wrist, symbols of past and future combined. Beyond happy. This is better than any fairy tale, because it's real. It's ours. Their garden reception lasted well into the evening, intimate and joyful. Thomas gave a touching speech about redemption and love's power to heal. Linda told the story of watching them fall in love across contract negotiations. The Daily Brew staff presented them with a coffee bean unity ceremony, blending their favorite roasts just as they had blended their lives. As they shared their first dance beneath strings of twinkling lights, Pinnacle and Nora held each other close, swaying to the music. They'd come so far from that first business proposal, from contracts and conditions, from broken trust and shattered dreams. They'd built something stronger than any legal document could create, a love based on understanding, growth, and the courage to believe in second chances. Their story, which began with cold coffee and broken plates, had transformed into something rare and precious, a real-life fairy tale, complete with all the complexities and imperfections that made it authentically theirs. And as they danced beneath the stars in their garden, surrounded by the people who had supported their journey, both Pinnacle and Nora knew that this was just the beginning of their greatest adventure yet. Chapter 11. Together. The autumn leaves were turning golden again as Pinnacle and Nora Wolfe celebrated their first few months as husband and wife. Their partnership had blossomed in ways that exceeded even their own expectations, both personally and professionally. Wolfe Enterprises headquarters hummed with renewed energy under their joint leadership. Pinnacle had insisted on Nora taking a key executive role after her graduation, not because she was his wife, but because her innovative approaches to corporate responsibility had already begun reshaping the company's future. One particularly busy Thursday afternoon, Pinnacle paused in the doorway of Nora's office, taking a moment to admire his wife in her element. She sat at her desk, suit jacket draped over her chair, sleeves rolled up as she conducted a video conference with their new foundation's international partners. The key he'd given her still hung at her throat, now accompanied by a small gold Compashi's gift for their 1-month anniversary. "The rehabilitation center in Singapore is showing promising results," Nora was saying, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had earned her respect throughout the corporate world. "Their integration of financial counseling with addiction treatment is exactly what we envisioned." Pinnacle smiled, remembering how this particular project had begun with her father's desire to make amends. The Wolfe Bean Foundation for Recovery and Financial Rehabilitation had quickly become a model for comprehensive addiction treatment worldwide. "Mrs. Wolfe," her assistant's voice came through the intercom, "your father's here for the board meeting." Nora's face lit up as Thomas entered, looking every bit the successful businessman he'd once been and now was again. 9 months had stretched into a year of sobriety, and he'd become an influential speaker on addiction recovery, his story inspiring others to seek help. "Hope I'm not interrupting," Thomas said, embracing his daughter before shaking Pinnacle's hand. "But the addiction counselor's training program proposal needs your final approval before the board meeting." "Never interrupting," Nora assured him, switching off her video conference. "Pinnacle, did you review the latest numbers?" "Already approved," he moved to her desk, dropping a kiss on her temple, "though I did have one suggestion for the family support component." They fell into an easy discussion about program logistics, the three of them working together with the kind of synchronicity that came from absolute trust. Through the office windows, Manhattan's skyline stretched out before them, no longer a symbol of what Pinnacle had lost, but of what they'd built together. Later that evening, after a successful board meeting where the training program had been unanimously approved, Pinnacle and Nora walked home through Central Park. Despite their restored wealth, they'd maintained this habit from their early days, treasuring the quiet moments between their busy lives. "Do you ever miss it?" Pinnacle asked suddenly as they passed their favorite bench, the one where they'd first admitted their feelings weren't just business anymore. "Miss what?" Nora's hand was warm in his, her wedding ring catching the sunset's light. "The coffee shop, the simplicity of those early days." She laughed, the sound still his favorite melody. "You mean, do I miss you sitting there for 14 hours drinking cold coffee just to walk me home?" "Hey, that was a solid business strategy," he protested with a grin. She stopped walking, turning to face him. "I don't miss the struggle or the uncertainty, but sometimes I do miss making your coffee. It felt like our own private language before we had words for what we were feeling." Pinnacle pulled her close, breathing in the subtle vanilla scent of her perfume mixed with the autumn air. "We could put an espresso machine in your office." Or, she smiled against his chest, "Done. Your assistant called mine. It's being installed tomorrow." "Sneaky." "Strategic," she corrected, pulling back to meet his eyes. "Speaking of strategic, I have something to tell you." There was something in her voice that made Pinnacle's heart skip. "What is it?" Nora bit her lip, suddenly looking young and vulnerable despite her executive polish. "I was going to wait, plan some elaborate reveal, but I'm pregnant." The world seemed to stop spinning for a moment. "You're aware we're going to have a baby?" She nodded, eyes shining. "I found out this morning. Linda's the only other one who knows. I needed her to double-check the test because I couldn't quite believe it." Pinnacle pulled her into a fierce kiss, pouring all his joy and love into the gesture. When they finally parted, both breathless, He noticed several park-goers smiling at their obvious happiness. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. "Do you need anything? Should we call Dr. Wynne? Maybe we should get you home to rest." "Pinnacle." She laid her hand over his. "I'm fine." "Perfect. Actually, though I might need you to handle the Singapore conference next week. Apparently, morning sickness isn't just in the morning." He laughed, the sound pure joy. "I'll handle everything. You just focus on growing our miracle." They resumed their walk home, but Pinnacle couldn't stop stealing glances at his wife, marveling at how she seemed to glow with their secret. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "this isn't quite how we planned it in that first contract." "No," she agreed, squeezing his hand. "This is better. This baby isn't being created because of business strategy or corporate necessity. It's happening because we love each other, because it's right for us." As they approached their brownstone, Pinnacle pulled Nora to a stop one more time. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For breaking every clause in that original contract. For showing me that the best things in life can't be negotiated or planned. For giving me a real family instead of a business arrangement." Nora reached up to touch his face, her eyes full of love. "Thank you for letting me, for being brave enough to tear up that contract and risk your heart again." They stood there for a moment, the autumn wind swirling leaves around their feet, both remembering how far they'd come from that first meeting in a Brooklyn coffee shop. Their story had begun as a business proposition but had transformed into something far more precious, a testament to real love's power to heal, rebuild, and create miracles. Inside the brownstone, Pinnacle insisted on Nora resting while he called their favorite restaurant for dinner delivery. As he placed the order, he could hear her on the phone with Linda, their excited whispers carrying through the house. Their home office still held the torn pieces of their original contract, framed as a reminder of how sometimes life's greatest blessings come from letting go of careful plans and choosing love instead. Next to it hung photos from their garden wedding, and soon, Pinnacle knew, ultrasound images would join them, tangible proof of their journey from business arrangement to boundless love. That night, as they lay in bed discussing baby names and nursery colors, Pinnacle held Nora close, his hand resting protectively over their growing miracle. "I love you," he whispered into her hair. "Both of you. More than I ever thought possible." Nora's hand covered his, their fingers intertwining over the place where their future grew. "We love you too," she replied, more than any contract could ever specify. The city lights twinkled beyond their windows, stars in an urban sky, as two people who had once met over a business proposal drifted to sleep, their hearts beating in sync, their love story still unfolding in ways more beautiful than either could have imagined. Chapter 12. Triple Blessing. The December snow fell softly outside Mount Sinai Hospital's windows, coating Manhattan in a pristine white blanket. Pinnacle Wolf paced the private waiting room, his usual corporate composure completely abandoned. The past 9 months had been a journey of joy, preparation, and surprises, the biggest being the discovery that they were expecting not one baby, but 3. "Pinnacle, wear out the carpet all you want, but it won't make those boys arrive any faster," Linda Park said from her seat, though her own anxiety was visible in how tightly she gripped her coffee cup. In the corner, Thomas Bean sat quietly, praying, his 2-year sobriety chip clutched in his hand like a talisman. The journey to this moment had been extraordinary. Nora had continued working until her 7th month, masterfully running board meetings, even as their triplets made their presence known with enthusiastic kicks. Pinnacle had thrown himself into preparing for fatherhood with the same intensity he once reserved for corporate takeovers, reading every book on multiple births and converting their brownstone's 3rd floor into a state-of-the-art nursery. A nurse appeared in the doorway, her face bright with excitement. "Mr. Wolf, it's time." Pinnacle's heart leapt into his throat as he followed her through the corridors to the delivery room. Nora lay there, beautiful despite her exhaustion, her hand automatically reaching for his as he entered. "Ready to meet our boys?" she asked, her voice tired but strong. More than ready, he kissed her forehead, taking his position beside her. "Though I still think you're the strongest person I know for carrying 3 future corporate raiders at once." She laughed, then grimaced as another contraction hit. "Less joking, more hand-holding, Mr. Wolf." The next hours were a blur of intense moments. Nora's incredible strength, and the steady encouragement of their medical team. Finally, at 3:47 a.m., on the 12th of December, the first cry pierced the air. "Baby A is here," the doctor announced. "A healthy boy." Pinnacle felt tears streaming down his face as their firstborn was placed briefly on Nora's chest. "Lupus," they whispered together, the name they'd chosen for their eldest. At 3:52 a.m., their second son arrived, announcing his presence with an even louder cry. "Cedar," Nora breathed, touching his tiny hand before he was whisked away for cleaning. The final push came at 3:58 a.m., and their youngest son, Raven, completed their trio of miracles. The delivery room burst into applause. Triplet births without complications were worth celebrating. After the initial flurry of medical attention, Pinnacle found himself seated beside Nora's bed, 3 tiny bundled forms distributed between them. Each boy was perfect, their features a beautiful blend of both parents. "They're magnificent," Thomas said softly from the doorway, where he and Linda watched the new family with joy. Lupus, the eldest by 11 minutes, already showed signs of his father's determined expression, his tiny hand gripping Pinnacle's finger with surprising strength as the proud father introduced himself to his firstborn. Cedar, nestled in the crook of Nora's arm, displayed a serene temperament that reminded everyone of his mother's quiet strength. His eyes, when they fluttered open, seemed to take in everything with careful consideration. And Raven, the youngest by mere minutes, alternated between peaceful sleep and alert curiosity, his features a perfect blend of both parents. He was the smallest of the 3 but made up for it, with an enthusiastic grip on the key necklace that still hung at his mother's throat. 3 wolf cubs, Linda mused, snapping photos for their family album. "The media is going to have a field day with this." "Let them," Pinnacle said, never taking his eyes off his sons. "Some things are beyond headlines." The morning sun was just beginning to paint the sky in pastel shades when their first visitors arrived. The Daily Brew staff, led by their old manager Mr. Carter, brought specialty coffee for everyone and 3 tiny barista aprons they'd had custom-made as a joke. "Future coffee magnates," Carter said gruffly, though his eyes were suspiciously moist as he watched Nora with her sons. The grumpy manager, who had once threatened to fire her, was now one of their foundation's strongest advocates. Throughout the day, a steady stream of well-wishers filled the room with love and congratulations. The Wolf Enterprises board sent 3 identical silver rattles, each engraved with a boy's name and birth time. The foundation staff contributed to a college fund for each child, though Pinnacle and Nora agreed that, like their mother, the boys would learn the value of earning their own way. As evening approached, the visitors departed, leaving the new family in peaceful privacy. Pinnacle sat on the edge of Nora's bed, marveling at how naturally she handled their 3 newborns. "Remember when this all started?" he asked softly, watching Cedar and Raven sleep, while Lupus studied the world with serious eyes. "A business contract for 1 heir." Nora smiled, adjusting Cedar's blanket. "God has a sense of humor, giving us 3 at once, though I suspect these boys will keep us too busy for any hostile takeovers in the near future." "The only hostile takeover happening will be them conquering our hearts," Pinnacle agreed, gently stroking Raven's tiny cheek. "Though I think that battle's already won." Thomas appeared with fresh coffee for Pinnacle and ice chips for Nora. "The nurses say everything looks perfect. All 3 boys are strong and healthy. Like their mother," Pinnacle said proudly. "Like both their parents," Thomas corrected, watching his grandsons with wonder. "They're born into a legacy of strength, perseverance, and redemption. These boys will grow up knowing that second chances are possible, that love is stronger than any contract, and that true wealth isn't in bank accounts, but in family bonds." Nora's eyes filled with tears as she looked at her father, strong, sober, restored. "They'll know what real success looks like," she said softly, "not just in business, but in life." As if understanding they were being discussed, all 3 boys seemed to wake at once, their different personalities already showing in how they demanded attention. Lupus was direct and insistent, Cedar quietly persistent, and Raven charmingly demanding. Pinnacle and Nora worked in perfect synchronization, attending to their sons' needs with the same partnership that had rebuilt Wolf Enterprises. Their love, which had begun as a business arrangement in a Brooklyn coffee shop, had multiplied into something more wonderful than either could have imagined. "I love you," Pinnacle whispered to Nora as their boys drifted back to sleep. "All four of you, more than I ever thought possible." "We love you too," she replied, her eyes shining with joy and exhaustion, though I think we can officially say that the original contract has been more than fulfilled. "Exceeded all projections," he agreed with a smile. "Best return on investment ever." The snow continued falling outside their window, coating the city in pristine white as night fell. Inside the hospital room, Pinnacle Wolf held his family close, knowing that all his past success paled in comparison to this moment. From a business arrangement had grown an epic love story. From broken trust had come unshakable faith. From a simple contract had sprung a family bound, not by legal documents, but by threads of love stronger than any corporate merger. As their three miraculous sons slept peacefully, Pinnacle and Nora shared a look that said more than words ever could. Their journey from business proposal to boundless love had given them more than they'd ever dreamed, possibly no, just one heir, but three beautiful boys who would grow up knowing that the greatest contracts are written not on paper, but on the heart. Lupus, Cedar, and Raven Wolf were their parents' greatest collaboration, their most precious merger, their perfect partnership made manifest. And as the new family spent their first night together, the torn pieces of the original contract that had brought Pinnacle and Nora together, the gathered dust in their frame at Homea. Reminder that sometimes life's greatest blessings come from letting go of careful plans and letting love write its own terms. From the ashes of betrayal, Pinnacle and Nora built something greater than a business empire. They built a love story that would be told for generations, proving that sometimes the best contracts are written not on paper, but on the heart.